So, Giacomo, I hope you're back there. I'm about to bring you up, brother. Please, everybody, put your hands together for Giacomo Zucco.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, so why can't we all get along? This is about peace. This is about being nice to each other by understanding why we fight. This is the pictorial representation of Bitcoin right now, and we'll try to see why is that and how it can be any different, if it can be any different. Of course, as Daniel said, we all know about the block size war. It was a very harsh fight about the very soul of Bitcoin. It was formally about a technical detail, so the trade-off between large blocks that make transaction very, very cheap, but validation very, very expensive, and small blocks that make validation very, very cheap, but transacting very, very expensive. So it was apparently small technical details, but around these, there were a lot of other fights playing out. The fight between miners and users, the fight between corporate interest, US organized corporate interest, and again the pleb users, the fight between engineers and ideologically inclined Bitcoin that maybe don't know about the technical trade-off. So there were many, many things packed into this. If you want to know more about that, I really suggest this book. It's a good book. So if you haven't read it yet, do read it. It's very interesting because it doesn't touch only on the technical part, which is paradoxically, I think is not even the important part of this war. The important part was about control, it was about governance, it was about what is the real Bitcoin. The technical details of the block size was mostly just the trigger, like the, I don't know, the golden apple for the Trojan Wars. It was just the trigger that exploded something deeper in the history of Bitcoin. After you read this book, if you still want to go on learning something, you may read a new book about that, which is this. But you know, there is a problem with sequels. They are never exactly as good as the originals. Still, if you feel bored, you can also watch a sequel. Sometimes sequels are good, not this case, but still. But the point is that there is no, many Bitcoiners think that the block size wars were an exceptional moment, a moment which was different from anything else in Bitcoin. So the idea is that in Bitcoin, as a default, we all agree, we are all nice, we are all in peace, but only sometimes, like during the block size wars, there was some kind of special apocalyptic conflict. And if you are in this mindset, you may be very worried that we may get there again. So you see the situation in Bitcoin as constant peace with some exceptional eruption of war and conflict. I will try to argue that that's not the case by making a few examples. Last year, here in Prague, I gave this talk that this year Alan Farrington was copying, like he was doing Giacomo Zucco Cash. And this talk was about the history of what last year I was calling ordinals. Now there is a new term that basically incorporates all the points. We call them retardinals. And so the talk about retardinals was at the very beginning, I think, of a new conflict in Bitcoin. Because packed into this debate and packed into this friction and conflict, there are a lot of points about the very nature of Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin for? Who can control Bitcoin? What is, well, technical details at all. This debate may seem something trivial, but it's packed with technical details. Watching this debate, watching people fighting about this, many people learn the difference between the mempool policies and the block rules. So there are a lot of technical nuances that you can learn from this. And the idea is that I don't want to say that this is exactly the same as the block size war. the block size war was something big in Bitcoin. The retardinal wars are something small in comparison. For example, I will never really draw a parallel between the two. For example, during the block size wars, you had one man, industry leader, organizing an entire magazine into the war, for example, promoting the New York Agreement. This is CoinDesk that was pushing the big blocker agenda. They were using a conference, like the greatest brand of conferences, in order to push that agenda. They used the conference consensus in order to organize the closed-door meeting of the New York Agreement big blockers. They were in collusion with miners, with the leaders of the miner industry, and they were working together with shitcoin scammers. So the retardinal war is completely different. There's nothing that can draw any parallel between the two. I will never claim that there is still a magazine organizing a conference allying with miners and shitcoiners, but still, you can find some very hidden resemblance maybe somewhere. But there is another contact between the retardinal wars and civil wars in Bitcoin. I mentioned it very briefly during my speech last year, but you can read it more if you go on the beautiful website BitMEX Research. BitMEX is an exchange, but they also do research, and they are great at that. You can find very, very good articles about the history of Bitcoin. And if you look for BitMEX Research, you can find this article about the op return wars of 2014. dApps, so like decentralized applications, versus Bitcoin transactions. So nothing is really new under the sun. This is exactly the same discussion that is going on today of the opposition between users that want to transact Satoshis using Bitcoin for the original purpose and users that are really, really into new application or that can be more or less organic, more or less compatible with the infrastructure for Bitcoin. So read this article. It's very, very good. And you can see that even just starting from my speech last year, from the retardinal wars, you can follow up the threads of the conflicts, and you can find a lot of other conflicts. For example, we just mentioned that the retardinal wars are basically they are just a return of the op return wars. So this is nothing really new. But there is something more into that. For example, people during the retardinal wars are discussing about miner incentives. What if miners, so for example, there is spam on the blockchain. Miners should not mine it, but why not? If the spam is paying money, it's entirely rational and incentives compatible for the miners to actually mine that transaction. But that brings up a more complex problem, because if some external entity like a government will pay miners in order to mine empty blocks, or in order to reorg the chain to only have empty blocks, or in order to reorg the chain to have double spending, the miners, for the very same reasons, would just include any kind of transaction, any kind of block structure, anything that gives them money. Mining is a very hard industry. You have very, very small margins, and you have very, very high costs that you have to pay every month. So you cannot easily afford long-term thinking and low-time preference. Paradoxically, we talk about Bitcoin as a low-time preference device and structure, but miners tend to be very high-time preference for a reason, because it's a very, very hard cutthroat competition. So from the retardinal wars, you can already see the germs of what I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think may become inevitable over the years in Bitcoin, which is a full-out hash rate war. Yeah, that's, well, too long, but anyway. The hash rate wars is when somebody outside Bitcoin pays miners in order to damage Bitcoin. And from the point of view of incentives, miners that need to pay bills very, very fast, they have to take that money. They cannot leave it on the table. So there are many discussions about this. What do we do? Do we try to outcompete the external attacker with fees, how we can organize the aggregation of more fees to outcompete the attackers, or we just soft fork away miners, which is like an atomic option that can actually break Bitcoin forever. So it's a very, very delicate discussion, but it was also, I think it's starting to grow, and in the retardinal version, it's a very soft version of this war. Okay, there are some NFT scams. Some people are using the blockchain as a spam repository for the NFT scam, for association marketing with Bitcoin. Maybe there are a few people in the US that are investing on this, so they are pumping this narrative, but it's not so bad. But it can get bad. Bitcoin is fragile at the point of hash rate corruption. You can bribe miners to hurt Bitcoin. So this may become a full-fledged war. But also, if you think about the retardinal wars, it looks like the same factions, the same teams, are actually dividing over many other lines. Not precisely, but pretty much. For example, you probably notice, if you follow this kind of Twitter drama or GitHub drama or mailing list drama, you may notice that many of the people that advocate for anti-spam filter, continuation of the tradition of anti-spam filters in Bitcoin, they also tend to be very skeptical of new soft forks and new features in Bitcoin. The reason, I think, is completely misguided, but the reason is that the spam attack of the retardinals and the inscriptions has been associated with Taproot. That was a soft fork innovation. So many people think that Taproot was responsible for the current spam attack, which I think is not the case at all. I tried to argue for this point last year in the talk, but still some people think that. So many people that are outraged by the spam attack, they tend to be against any other future soft fork. You can probably hear this kind of narrative around. You know, guys, Taproot gave us this spam attack. Fees now are very high. UTX society is growing. My Raspberry Pi cannot sustain the time chain and the UTX society anymore. So let's not have any other soft fork ever, because the last time we did, it was a mistake. I think this is not a consistent position. And in fact, you cannot really draw the lines between the same, they are not the same teams in these two wars. Like, for example, people will consider Luke Dashier as one of the leaders of the filter position in the retardinals wars, but Luke is very much pro any kind of new soft fork to add, for example, covenants and other features, while some of the people that are very, very into, some of the people closer to Bitcoin Core and maybe more apologetical about the spam attack, they are pretty much against new soft fork, or at least in the short term. So it's a different kind of fight, but it's still, as you can see, still all connected, because the points in Bitcoin, the points that create conflicts are always the same: about control, about tragedy of the commons, about shared resources, about what people do on their node that can influence what people has to do in their own other node. There is also a spin-off of this. Ossification is, just to clarify, but I think you know it. Ossification is the position for which Bitcoin at the base layer is just like the internet at the base layer. The IP protocol, the internet protocol, is not changing since 1984. All the stack of protocols above it, like TCP, HTTP, they are changing a lot continuously. So the internet is changing every day. But the base rules of the internet packages are not changing since 1984. And the idea is that maybe the consensus rules of Bitcoin may be something like that. And we may be at that stage already, either because it's better not to change it, or because it's better to change it, but it's impossible to coordinate the change. This is also overlapping with the Lightning Network wars. I think the Lightning Network wars are a moment in the Lightning Network development in which people are starting to really feel tired of the work that is needed to make Lightning Network really, really usable in its final form. So there was a problem with overhyping. During the block size wars, it seemed like the Lightning Network was a panacea, a silver bullet solving everything. It wasn't. If you read the Lightning Network white paper, by Poon and Ria, you can find the last section about all the limitation of Lightning, everything that is missing, everything that will come later, everything that will require just a second layer change, or everything that will require a base layer change in order to improve. So if I remember our discussion during Scaling Bitcoin 2016, I remember that everybody was convinced that the Lightning Network was just a very, like an embryo of an idea to be developed over decades. But then messages get oversimplified when they reach out. So people basically bought the Kool-Aid that after the block size wars, every single trade-off or problem in Bitcoin was solved forever. So it was like, yeah, I mean, Lightning Network, privacy Lightning Network, scalability Lightning Network, miner censorship Lightning Network. And I may be responsible as well of this oversimplification in many, many occasions. And it's wrong, because in order to really learn in a low time preference way, you have to be honest and you have to also explain the failures. If you only show the successes, you will create some kind of inconsistent narrative that sooner or later will explode into something. So now you have the pendulum swinging. So now from Lightning Network can do everything forever, there is a consistent part of the Bitcoin ecosystem that are just telling you that Lightning Network doesn't exist or doesn't work while you use it, basically. So there was a nice joke by John Nakamoto. Yeah, we know that the Lightning Network works in practice, but does it work in theory? Because everybody's basically using it, but still there is a consistent part of the ecosystem denying that it even, like Lightning Network deniers. This is also very deep because it talks about narratives, it talks about also human habits. For example, there is a protocol design action. You design a nice protocol. That's the fun part. It's hard, but it's fun. You launch the protocol and you feel cool. You feel like Satoshi because you designed something new. Now, this is just the beginning. Now you have to make it work. This requires a lot of very boring actions over the years, building an infrastructure, building better UX, building better user education. This is super boring. So people are like, the Lightning Network doesn't work as I expected. Of course, because they expected something wrong or exaggerated. So how can we do? And you tell them, well, we should change these and build these. Yeah, but this will take years. We need something now. So let's just redesign a new protocol from scratch that will replace everything. You can see the paradox in this position. If you created a protocol, but it's not working as a final form yet because it needs a lot of years and decades of boring work, then if you just throw away the protocol and start again with the new protocol, you're just renovating the same fallacy. Okay, Lightning Network required a lot of works, but actually this new idea, now this just comes turnkey solution, silver bullet, panacea, and it will have no trade-offs. It will require no work on UX education, nothing, infrastructure. It will just work out of the box, which is never the case. It was not the case for Bitcoin main layer as well. So you can see all these fights are not just entertaining because people block each other, they insult each other, which is, I mean, we need some drama, but they're also educational if you really enter into details. And I think that the ossification debate can also be connected with another debate, which also I think will become a major civil war in Bitcoin, but this will be a civil war that I hope will never be won by any party. This is a debate between hard money versus dark money. So you already see some people saying, if you want Bitcoin to be successful as investment, hard money, you should never change it anymore at any level. This is a typical sailor position, for example. And then you have some engineers saying, no, we should change something because we need, for example, more privacy incentives or more privacy flexibility at the base layer. And so screw this NGU narrative, screw money, screw investors. We just have to tinker with things and change. I already made the case. This is a slide from my presentation about Bitcoin culture, where I try to analyze. I'm very proud of this slide because it's very symmetrical with the colors and everything. But the main point is about the conflict between privacy and scarcity, and saving and spending, and dark money and hard money. There was a podcast with Stefan Livera where we discussed this, and a little bit also with Saifedean, we did discuss this, and with some Monero people. So I'm very into this war. I know that this war will happen and will become worse and worse. But this is a war I hope nobody will win, because I have a very yin-yang theory about this. We need both. We really need both. And they both help each other. So already starting from the retardinal wars, as you can see, I already connected it to basically the operator wars, and the ossification wars, the Lightning Network wars, these hard versus dark wars. And I see John entering now. So I want to also mention another civil war. This is interesting because this was a civil war that was as vocal and vicious as any other Bitcoin civil war, but it was only fought by two people, basically. So it was basically Ryu Todd against Ken Carvalho. It was basically the two of them. This was the full RBF war. Friendship has been broken on this, and like a lot of Twitter threads have developed, but it basically was just the two guys there. You can see Ken Carvalho suffering a bit after the Hadouken, because I think that this one was won by Ryu Todd. But anyway, it doesn't matter, and it's also very useful to explain to you that it's not always the same teams fighting along the same lines. For example, in this case, Ryu Todd, or Peter, he was pretty consistent with the anti-filters position in the retardinal wars. It was about everything which is incentive compatible, even if it hurts the network or some use cases, must get in. And John was, no, this should not get in because it hurts some use cases. Then John, I think, changed his mind a little bit about the retardinal wars. After the combat, the civil war with Peter, doesn't believe so much that anymore, but you can ask him. So this is another example, even if it was mostly, I'm joking, not just two people, but I, frankly, personally, I really like to engage civil wars and to feel like very, very like fighting. But in this case, I really failed. People gave me hats and tried to hype me up about this, but I couldn't really hype myself up. But anyway, this was also fun to watch and educational to watch. But when I entered the Bitcoin space in late 2012, beginning of 2013, I remember that the first thing I saw in Bitcoin was actually people fighting. So my first experience with the Bitcoin forums was people fighting harshly. So I learned about Bitcoin 2012, December, and in the spring of 2013, I was starting to read forums in order to find my heroes, like the developers, the activists, the political activists, and I was expecting a community basically getting along. But what I found was the creation of the Bitcoin Foundation. You can find, again, on a BitMEX research website, you can find a great history, detailed history of the Bitcoin Foundation. It was kind of a fuck up. And within days from the launch of the Bitcoin Foundation, you can see people on GitHub fighting because some of the representatives of the foundation were ideologically exposed about crypto-anarchism, not paying taxes, using Bitcoin as a tool for freedom, while others, namely the developers, they were like, no, this is just technology, don't over-ideologize it. They were like fighting against. And people were really insulting each other, and not along the same lines. For example, here you can find Luke Dashier, NAC putting extremist anarchist, at least Matonis, as press contacts. Which is, I'm friend with Luke, but I am an extremist anarchist, so that was very hurtful for me to read. And Gregory Maxwell piling in with the same narrative, and Jeff Garzik, that was later on a champion of the bit blockers against Luke and against Gregory. He was actually on their side against Matonis, Ver, Andreas Antonopoulos, and others. So again, let's get to the core of the presentation. Why do Bitcoiners fight so much? This is one of my favorite memes. Brothers and sisters are natural enemies, like shitcoiners and Bitcoiners, or bankers and Bitcoiners, or statists and Bitcoiners, or Bitcoiners and other Bitcoiners. Damn Bitcoiners, they ruined Bitcoin. You Bitcoiners sure are contentious people. You just made an enemy for life. I love this. Let's try to understand why. I think there may be a few reasons for this. The first reason is that people just fight. If they care for something, they will fight. People fight about football teams, so you can expect them to fight about something relevant and consequential as Bitcoin. Also, people on the internet fight more. At the conferences, last year, I was saying that ordinals are retarded, but then a few ordinals friends approached me, and we were very friendly with each other, because I mean, when you are in, well, this is both good and bad. Like me and Ray Youssef just blocked each other, but if I'm in front of him, he's like 2 meters or something, I tend to be very, more agreeable than I am on Twitter. That's a fact. There are good things about this. The good thing is that the debate is not polluted by physical intimidation. This is a very cypherpunk idea. Even if you're bigger than me, I will still insult you because I'm protected by Twitter. So my content will be, in a way, more honest because I'm not scared. So that's a very cypherpunk point to it. But there's also a problem to it, because one of the problems is that internet communication, especially on Twitter, has a very, very low bandwidth, low emotional bandwidth and informational bandwidth. You cannot see the nuances, you cannot see the personal involvement, you cannot even see people smiling or exaggerating with hyperbolas, so you can miss information. So people fight more online, and let's face it, Bitcoin is a creature of the internet. Bitcoin can be used physically, just handing a key, but it's actually an internet protocol. So people fight more in Bitcoin. Also, subcultures always fraction. If you know about heavy metal, there is, the typical metal guy, this is not true metal. Or if you talk even about tools, like, do you use Vim or Emacs? Many of you may not know about these, but people basically broke friendships and families over a text editor for basically 30 years. And that really happened. People were hating each other because of 2 text editors. Well, Emacs is more than a text editor, but let's not get into that. So subcultures always fraction. The more specific and special the subculture, the more the internal fracture. Bitcoin is consequential. You cannot just expect Bitcoin to be just a text editor. If people fight over text editors, let's imagine about something that will probably disrupt the central banks and change a lot of distribution of power and wealth. And Bitcoin is decentralized, which is a feature, but it's also a problem, because there is no governance. Everybody's fighting with each other. Everybody can decide. You cannot. So in Linux, you can have a fight. You can have a civil war, and then somebody will come and they will fix it with authority, even positive authority. But they will fix it with authority and coordination. In Bitcoin, there is no authority figure. There was in the first few years. No wars during the Satoshi era, but now there is no authority figure anymore. And finally, Bitcoin is a global consensus system. This may seem like a technical point, but it's very, very important. In Bitcoin, to some level, we must agree on something in order to communicate, which is bad. There are some tools that are not global consensus system where we can agree to disagree. In Bitcoin, to some degree, we have to actually agree to disagree. We have to disagree about disagreeing. So let me end up with a typical pseudo-guru conclusion, and I'm over. What can we learn from this at a deeper level, as a lesson for ourselves and for myself, if I think about this? First, let's keep fighting. Embrace constant war because it's good for Bitcoin. It's good for Bitcoin because it means that there is no single piece of the Bitcoin culture that you can corrupt in order to corrupt the system. Because even if you convince some developer to do something, another developer will hate him for that and will expose him for that immediately. The constant fight will make very difficult to compromise and corrupt Bitcoin. So that's a good thing. It creates inefficiencies, but fighting is a way to keep the system decentralized. If we all get along, we become a target because we become coordinated and easy to infiltrate and corrupt. So keep fighting, like in the meme before, but maybe a few words, and then I'm over. Be humble, because even if the fight is good and it's a holy crusade, the point is that you, and I'm telling that to myself first, you don't matter that much. Not anymore, at least. Maybe some of people in this room did matter in 2017, maybe even us. Now we don't. Bitcoin is bigger than us, so relax, fight, but also like be conscious of the fact that you really don't matter. So take it easy, maybe don't break personal friendship too much, or maybe rebuild them later. The second point is be cautious. You don't know for sure you will be on the right side next time. past performance are not a guarantee for future performances. So you have seen that the same people have been on the past on the losing side or the winning side. The winning side eventually is always Bitcoin. But you have no guarantee that just because you feel you are with the same people, you will be again on the right side of history. That's true for myself as well. Then be honest. Example with the Lightning Network, I may have exaggerated with the hyping during the blocksize wars. Losing, in truth, is better than winning with lies. If you win with lies, your win is short-term. You will eventually see the victory crashing and crumbling upon you, because only truth is something that can stand time. So if something false is going at favor of your side in a civil war, it's still false, refuse it. And if something true is going in the favor of your opponent, embrace truth. Short term, that will hurt your war, but long term, it will actually help it. And finally, chill out. This is just about the future of humanity, so no pressure. Thank you.
Thank you, Giacomo. Excellent, as always. Thank you.